So, early last year, when I wrote and published Deuces Wild, which is part of my Vegas set high stakes series, I had this idea. And this will be a spoiler if you haven't read that book, but not too bad. Anyway, I introduced this theme in Deuces of roses and thorns. These elite assassins and bodyguards and escorts trained at this facility known as the Garden by the Belrose Corporation. Well, if you've read that book, you know that the Belrose compound was raided, their operations dismantled and dissolved, all of that. So, what happened to those roses and thorns? Well, here we go.
Dust. That was it. As far as the eye could see. Dust, dirt, sand, whatever the fuck you wanted to call it. The expanse of dry, still earth was only broken visually by the flat slate blue of the sky, dotted with the occasional billowy cloud. And of course, the road. This black streak of asphalt cutting down the center, generating visible heat waves that created a haze over the road. Riding with the top down was supposed to feel like a privilege, but out here, the atmosphere lacked the moisture to make the heat palatable. Hell, bearable. I fucking hated Nevada. If it weren't for the fact that the air conditioning had been the first thing to go when this piece of shit car started wearing at the seams, I wouldn't even attempt riding with the top down. But closing myself inside a hot metal box on wheels wasn't a viable alternative. So there I was, speeding down the road, cursing my luck as the hot, still breeze whipped the sweat from my brow. Remember, you asked for this. That was definitely one way to look at it. The presumption that I had a choice. Or hell, maybe it was just wishful thinking on my part. Finally, some semblance of control over my life, now that I was outside the confines of the garden. It wasn't like the fall of the Belroses left me with a lot of career potential. You couldn't exactly put the number of kills you've made on your resume. So this was where I found myself. In a half broken down drop top, whipping down the highway with my sights set on the outskirts of Vegas and a mission in mind that contradicted what had been bred into me. Wasn't the type to back off from a challenge, though. Far in the distance of the desert terrain, I spotted a group of structures, the first sign of life for miles. I pressed my foot to the gas and murmured sweet words to the car as its violent sputtering worsened, pleading with it to at least get me to that cluster of dusty, ramshackle buildings. Behind my aviators, my eyes narrowed as the wheels ate up the miles, taking in everything I could as I drew closer. Big Jake's Auto Repair and Salvage was painted in big, peeling white letters on the side of one building, beckoning weary travelers in that direction. Now I could see lines and piles of defunct vehicles, rusted and dilapidated, devolving back into the minerals used to create them. It looked a whole lot like some beginning of a horror movie where the black man dies first type shit, which still didn't really come close to the most harrowing situation I'd ever been in, but I was nobody's fool. I was still toying with the possibility of simply driving on when the car made the decision for me. It just stopped in the middle of the fucking road. No amount of cranking, cursing, or chastising would bring the engine back to life, but I damn sure tried, even as my sweat-soaked t-shirt baked onto my body. The lack of clouds was visually appealing, sure, but practically, it meant there was nothing to filter the intense heat from the sun. It seemed to shine extra hard as I slammed the car door and peered up one side of the road, then the other, looking for anybody coming from either direction before I set off on foot, heading for Big Jake's. Horror movie vibes be damned. If Big Jake wanted smoke, I had it for his ass. By the time I made it up to the shop, I was even less confident than I had been before. A mile in the scorching desert heat felt like 10, and I couldn't see any signs of human presence among the cracked blacktop and abandoned cars. The biggest of the buildings had 3 big garage-style doors, all closed except one. Against my better judgment, I drifted closer, pausing when I heard something that made my face twist into a frown. Beyonce? What kind of fucking mechanic shop was playing Beyonce? Loud, too. There must have been some kind of break in the music as I approached, because it resumed now, drowning out my damn thoughts as I moved closer to the open repair bay and stepped inside. Off to one side was a sleek motorcycle, gleaming chrome and polished black leather that starkly contrasted everything else. The walls and shelves were covered in typical grease and grime, and a dusty Cadillac took up the open space of the bay. The hood was up, and through the slight breaks in the music, I could hear the sound of something happening underneath. With narrowed eyes, I peered around it without getting closer, calling out, "Hey, I'm looking for Big Jake." Suddenly, the music stopped, and the air filled with the steady buzz of several oscillating fans I hadn't noticed at first, probably because they weren't doing shit but stirring up the hot air, moving it around without cooling it. Heavy boots thudded against the ground, rounding the car, and seconds later I was met with neatly arched eyebrows pulled into a scowl. "What do you want?" I couldn't stop my eyes from skipping down to full breasts clad in a stained white ribbed tank and mechanic's coveralls tied around a trim waist, with the pants swamping the petite woman in front of me. When my gaze came back up, I took in long lashes and high cheekbones, full lips and a little upturned nose, and clear, penny brown skin. "I want you to point me to Jake, sweetheart," I told her, "or whoever it is that's in charge around here." There was no missing the rise in her eyebrow, her apparent annoyance making it into a dark, menacing hook on her face as those pretty pink-brown lips turned up into a smirk. "Not your fucking sweetheart, first of all," she corrected me. "And Jake isn't here. I'm in charge." Her molten amber eyes were full of challenge as she glared up at me, a challenge I met with a smirk of my own. "You're in charge?" I asked, taking another sweep of her appearance. She couldn't be more than an inch or two over 5 feet. I scoffed. "Look, I have somewhere to be and not a lot of time for games. Where's Jake?" One hand propped on her hip, with the other, she aimed her pointer finger down. I frowned. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? "It means he's in the ground, as in dead," she elaborated with an inexplicable smile. "Would you like the gory details?" I took a step back. "Did you kill him?" "If I say yes, will it get you out of my face faster?" "Is that really the attitude you want to have with a potential customer?" I countered, words that made her eyes go wide. "Oh, is that what you are? I thought you were a sexist asshole, here to piss me off." Okay, maybe that was fair. "Listen, how about we start over?" I said, raising my hands to signal a truce. She laughed a little, kind of sexy to be honest, pulling the cotton bandana from her head and wiping her greasy hands on it. "Oh, you want to start over, do you?" She tipped her head to the side, and her thick, natural hair, twisted into ropes, swayed left. "Can we do that?" I asked earnestly. I was hot, tired, and had shit to do, so I really needed to shift this interaction in a different direction. In a direction I could actually use. Her only response was raised eyebrows and an otherwise blank expression on that pretty-ass face, which I took as a yes, even as she crossed her arms. "My car broke down about a mile up the road," I explained, "but I'm still some miles from where I need to be." She smirked. "And you need a big, strong man to help you out of your predicament, but all you have available is little old me, who couldn't possibly be of any assistance, right?" "My bad. I shouldn't have doubted your capacity just because you're a woman," I conceded. "Now, can you help me?" For a few moments, she just stared, then finally shook her head. "Nah, sorry. I'm just here to answer phones and keep everything clean." What little moisture I had left drained from my mouth as rage replaced whatever hopefulness I'd allowed to gain traction. and despite her dryly delivered sorry, there was no outward indication of anything but petty satisfaction from the woman in front of me as her smirk bloomed into a full grin. I'm kidding. I'll grab the keys for the tow truck. She shot me a mischievous wink as she turned, hip swaying, to head to the back wall, making sure I knew I had gotten played. I blew out a gruff sigh, biting my lip to keep my mouth shut before I offended her again. A moment later, a low mechanical rumble hit my ears, and more of the overbearing sunlight spilled into the space from the repair bay next to us as the door rolled open. The mechanic sauntered past me, not looking back, but I quickly raised my hands, catching the bottled water she tossed my way. Nice reflexes, she complimented, not waiting for a response before she moved on, pulling the dust cover from the big blue tow truck. Get in.
I can be anything that I want to be.
I closed my eyes and shook my head in a pointless attempt to clear that inept platitude from the recesses of my brain. It had been stuck there all morning, courtesy of a little kid's tablet blaring some cartoon while her mother ignored her in favor of whatever was happening on her cell phone. That had been a long-ass oil change. I couldn't figure out why it was sticking with me, couldn't figure out why it rankled me. It was just some stupid, faux inspirational bullshit aimed at children, and yet it wouldn't let me go. Wouldn't stop fucking taunting me. Maybe because I couldn't be anything that I wanted to be. I could be anyone that I wanted to be. That was a very specific specialty of mine, in fact, but when it all came down to it, there was this one thing I was, this one thing I was bred to be, this one thing that would never let me go. No getting around it. The sound of a male voice resonated through the tiny auto shop, drawing my attention from the vehicle I was currently working on. I turned my music off, stepping around the raised hood of the Cadillac to see who it was. A stranger, and we didn't get many of those around these parts. Especially not tall, handsome ones with smooth, praline-colored skin and broad shoulders wearing expensive mirrored aviators. It was close enough to Vegas, but far enough too. His presence was an anomaly. The way he whipped off his shades to peer at the building, his expression an even mixture of exasperation and disgust, confirmed it. "What do you want?" I asked, hollered, taking a few steps toward the open garage doors of the empty bay next to where I'd been working. His gaze shifted to me, narrowing with mild interest before a smirk curved his full lips upward. "I want you to point me to Jake, sweetheart," he said, with a slight nod toward the words painted in block letters along the back wall. "Or whoever it is that's in charge around here." "Not your fucking sweetheart," I corrected him, making no attempt to hide the irritation he'd ignited with that term. "And Jake isn't here. I'm in charge." "You're in charge?" the stranger countered, taking a step toward me. I crossed my arms and his eyes followed to the cleavage revealed by my white ribbed tank, something that would never usually be on this kind of display. Today, though, it was hot as fish grease outside, and the top half of my coveralls were off, with the arms tied securely around my waist. "Look, I have somewhere to be and not a lot of time for games. Where's Jake?" I propped a hand at my waist and used the other to point to the ground. Jake was long gone. Whoever this asshole was, he was dealing with me now. The shop was a good 30 miles from Las Vegas, where he'd probably come from, and another 6 from the little town where he was likely headed. He could walk, sure, but in this heat, he'd pass out first. So he corrected himself, and I ended up getting the tow truck to gather his piece of shit car. Back in the work bay, it took several tries to get the old school drop top to come to life, but then it cut off again. "So," he said, climbing from the driver's seat, "you see the problem?" My head bobbed in acknowledgement. "Mm-hmm. Sit down," I told him, gesturing toward the little waiting area where the little girl and her exhausted mother had been earlier. Because of his attitude, I was in no particular hurry to get to him while I had other vehicles ahead. I returned to the next bay, intending to finish up with the car I'd been working on when he arrived, at least until something caught my eye. Apparently, I wasn't the only one affected by the oppressive desert heat. The stranger lifted his hands, peeling his stylish leather jacket off his shoulders to reveal a plain white t-shirt underneath. To reveal thick, sculpted arms. To reveal a ring of thorns tattooed around his bicep. Fuck. 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 I averted my gaze, running my tongue over dry lips. My heart was racing, galloping, but I forced a calm demeanor, reaching casually for the long-reach screwdriver I'd been using earlier, closing my palm around the grooved handle, taking a deep, steadying breath, looking at him to double-check my aim, returning the grin he gave me. That was a mistake. Too late. I launched the screwdriver anyway. It stuck in the wall where his head had been because he was already out of his seat, moving toward me with terrifying determination. That didn't mean I wasn't ready for him. I easily dodged his first swing, catching him under the chin with a counterblow that would have dropped a normal man to his knees. Thorns weren't normal, though. My hit staggered him just enough for me to slide past, not letting myself get boxed into a corner of the garage. Instead of going around his car, I skirted over the hood, smacking the button on the wall that would raise the door for the back entry into the garage. There was no shortage of creaking and grinding as the door let out a massive groan, then slowly started climbing open. The angry thorn I was trapped in here with wasn't about to wait on that, though. His heavy boots told me exactly where he was, not that it mattered much anymore without the element of surprise working in my favor. I'd never been a slouch in hand-to-hand combat, but over the last year, I'd certainly been a slouch in my training. He had not. It was clear he had no intention of making the same mistake of letting me dodge a blow. That was apparent from the brain-addling jab he landed on my jaw, followed quickly by a shot to the ribs. I dropped to the ground, gasping for the breath that hit had snatched from my lungs as he stepped back, presumably unwilling to go harder on me than necessary. His bad. I used the leverage of the ground to launch myself at his legs, knocking him down. I kept my momentum, catching his wrist to twist behind his body and not bothering to make the mistake of hesitating before I dislocated it. If it was him or me, it was going to be me. It would always be me. I uncovered the blade I kept tucked in my waist, fully prepared to drive it right into his spine. However, he was barely fazed by the current uselessness of his wrist, easily tossing me from his back before he smacked the blade from my hold. With one hand, he snatched me by the throat, flipping me over to pin me there with my back against the ground. "Who the fuck are you?" he growled, his deep brown eyes darkening with molten anger. I curved my fingers into claws, trying to reach his face, but our size difference placed that target out of reach. When I didn't answer, he tightened his grip on my throat, crushing me with his weight. "Answer the goddamn question," he demanded. "You first," I managed to gasp as I planted a foot on the ground as a lever to drive my opposite shin into his, a move that resulted in searing pain for both of us. The difference was I knew it was coming, a painful risk I took to get his hand off my neck and disable him long enough for me to launch myself from the ground and jump over him, barely dodging as he grabbed for me. I easily maneuvered through the maze of parts that were stored in the back, while the unfamiliar setting slowed him down just enough for me to make it to my motorcycle in the back. Thank God I always left my keys in the switch. My bike roared to life just as the familiar sound of the rolling door hit my ears, and I realized he was trying to close me in. I wasted no time gunning it, even as the opening between the bottom of the door and the ground started getting smaller. I had to lean at damn near a 90-degree angle to clear the opening, but that was fine, as long as I cleared it. I glanced behind me as the motorcycle kicked up dry dust, trying to see if I was being followed. Not that it mattered. They'd never catch me.
That's all for the first episode of The Rose Who Got Away. I'm not sure how many episodes this one will be, but I'll be back in about a week with another one. As always, thank you for joining me for Storytime.